Welcome to the next episode in the saga of the SD40-2 build.
Yeah.
It's looking like a real engine.
Yeah. Yeah, it's coming along. Last time we finished up the painting.
Yep.
Which should be it for painting, except for maybe a few minor details and touch-ups here and there.
You promised that we'd see some decals this time.
Yeah, so this time we're going to do the decals, and the model's already been clear-coated, if you recall from the last episode, so it's all ready for decals.
All right.
And now it's just time to get to work putting them on. I usually like to start with the cab numbers on one side.
And why is that?
No particular reason other than it just finally gives the engine an identity.
Oh, I see.
So unfortunately, there's a 51. There's no 26 on this sheet. And this is microscale sheet 87-29. And I also have microscale sheet 87-1067, which is extra numbers, but there's no 26 on that one either. So I'm going to have to cut out the 2 and the 6 separately.
Oh, well.
So you can use scissors if you want, but I like to use an X-Acto knife just because I think it's a little more precise.
Yeah, probably doesn't matter in any way.
Not really. The only thing I like to do is to trim close to the numbers. I mean, microscale decals usually don't have a lot of excess clear film, so it's not too much of a problem. But I like to trim as close to the numbers as practical. So I've dipped the decals in water, and then I put them on my piece of glass here. They're still wet, there's water.
Yeah,
here.
I can see like bubbly water bubbles on them.
Yeah, and I'll just let them soak off the paper a little bit, and then we can put them on the model. Microscale has 2 different decal solutions. One's called Microset and one's called Microsol. And I'm not sure. Sometimes it seems like some people get confused about what they're for.
Okay.
Microset really should be called Micro-Wet because it's a wetting agent.
Uh-huh.
And what you do is you brush on Microset where the decal is going to go. So Microset goes under the decal, basically.
Yeah.
And this is to help you position it.
Oh, right, because when you get it on there, you got to slide it around, right?
Right. So once you got some Microset on there, take the decal, kind of gently
slide it off.
Now, obviously, it's not lined up yet. It'll take me a while to get that, but we can.
Yeah, what we'll do probably is we'll get the decals on there, and then I'm sure you'll have to fine-tune it closer to yourself, right? So
right. I really need to look at this, and I actually use a straight edge and sighting down the model to get them all in line, because it's kind of hard to line them up, especially when they're really wet like this, because they just tend to move around.
Okay, we'll do that off camera and come back with it.
Okay. So one of the things I do when I'm putting on numbers like this individually is to use a straight edge and try to line up the bottoms of the numbers as best I can.
Yeah, as closely as possible. No, but think about it though, Dan. When these prototypes were made, I'm sure that they were not always picture perfect with the numbers.
No, I've seen real engines that are not, that have the but
slightly off, right?
This is one of those things that looks okay in real life, but when you see it on a model, it looks like someone made a mistake.
Well,
so
yeah.
Anyway, the other thing I do is to eyeball it, looking down like this way, or the other way along the locomotive, and make sure that it's not going up or going down. You know what I mean? So you want basically the numbers to be level.
Yeah, as proper as possible, right? Because if they twist or turn at all, it'll look funky.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is looking pretty good. I'm just going to let these dry for a bit, and then we'll get back to that. Since these are dry enough now not to move around too much, I added the little MKM decal underneath. MKM was something that Santa Fe did in the 90s. Basically contracting out the maintenance on some engines. Some engines were actually sold to MKM, Morrison Knudsen, basically.
Yeah.
Others just had maintenance contracts, and I believe the SD40-2s just had maintenance contracts. But in any case,
well, this one does now.
Yeah. In any case, in the photos that I have, it belongs on this engine. So the other decal fluid from Microscale is Microsol. And this is a solvent that actually makes the decal adhere to the paint. So you don't put this on until you're really sure that the decals are in the right spot.
Right, because otherwise they might move, huh, when you put it on?
Well, no, they won't move after you put it on.
No, I said when you put it on, not after you put it on.
Right,
but when you put the brush on there.
Right. So microset, if the decals aren't in the right place, you can sometimes put more microset on and refloat them.
Yeah.
And then move them again. But you don't want to try that once you put the microsol on. So the first time I do this, I try to just really lightly and try not to move anything. All right, so now I'm going to put the big Santa Fe decal on the side. And I'll start by just coating the whole area with microset.
Have you ever put microsol by accident when you meant to put microset?
No.
Micro wet?
No. Not since I've realized how they're supposed to be used. And microscale does actually have instructions that tell you these things. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry, I wanted to say people who use decals but don't know about this should really look into it, because I remember when I was a kid and we used to build models, we didn't use anything but water.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the whole point of using this stuff is to make the decals adhere to the paint so it looks like they're painted on.
Yeah.
And you don't get any silvering or film showing. Another thing to remember is to really pay attention to prototype photos, because my model of 5111 is sitting here and the Santa Fe is actually in a very different place on 5126.
I noticed earlier too that the swoop of the yellow here is also in a very different place on the other locomotive.
It is, yeah. So, and I've just been following prototype photos. So now I just need to position this and make sure it's all straight like I did with the numbers on the cab. Okay, so after some finagling, I think I got the Santa Fe decal in the right spot.
Yeah, looks pretty good.
And now I'll go ahead and start coating it with some microsol.
So this is going to make it settle into the cracks and into the door seams and all that?
Right, that's the idea. So now I can start on some of the smaller decals.
Yeah, you have like warning labels and stuff?
Yeah, well, this is a builder's plate.
Is it legible with magnification?
I'm not sure, but there is actually a plate physically molded onto the sill. So it goes right on that. So the builder's plate is from microscale sheet MC4056.
Okay.
And then they also have sheet MC4389, which is actually conspicuity stripes for modern freight cars.
Okay.
But what I like to do is I cut them in half, because Santa Fe had these little yellow warning labels on the sill. And this is something that's almost impossible to see.
Yeah, I can see them on the other one, the other model that's sitting off camera. I didn't notice that before.
Right. So I may have to reposition this later because it's really hard to see in the photos, but put one of those on there and straighten it out. And they kind of go all down the side, so I'm going to put some of those on. So in the painting chapter, I mentioned that I was going to use a decal for this top step.
Yeah, I remember that.
So what I did was I cut a very thin strip of yellow from a microscale trim film sheet. It's sheet TF6, which is yellow.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a big decal sheet of yellow. And I just cut...
It matches pretty well, though.
It's pretty close. Yeah, it's not exactly, but with something this small, you really can't tell. So I just put the decal right there. And you can paint it too, like with a brush, but I generally prefer either decals or to mask it and airbrush it, because I think it just produces a nicer looking line.
It's cleaner lines, yeah.
So the yellow Santa Fe decal is going on pretty well so far. It's going to take repeated applications of microsol and maybe poking it with a sharp X-Acto blade if there's any bubbles to get it to finally lay down.
Mm-hmm.
But so far I'm happy with what I'm seeing here.
Yeah. I mean, it looks right?
Yeah.
I see that you've added some warning labels and stuff.
Right. A couple of these came from the sheet 8729, which is the Santa Fe decal sheet, but the rest of these are various little warning stickers that I've got from some microscale data sheets. And if you want the specific numbers, it's 87527, which says for EMD and GE diesels, and 87925, which says for GE -9s and AC 4400s, MC 4056, which is builder's plates, and some other things for EMD and GE, and then MC 5016, which is data for SD70 ACEs and SD70-2s. Now I know this isn't any of those engines, but some of the little stickers are the same.
right?
And some of them are correct based on photos, so that's what I do.
Right, and these are from micro scale.
All from microscale,
Yeah.
yeah. All the decals I'm using are from microscale.
Worth mentioning again, so.
Yeah. Need to put the cigar band decal on the nose.
Dan, we've been working on this thing, or you have. Well, we've been working on the video, so, right? So we've been working on it for so long. I mean, let's see. As we're filming this, it's November of 2016. And I can't believe that it's actually so close to being done because it's been in such an unfinished state for so long.
Yeah.
So he's basically having to work on 3 sides at the same time. And the only way to do that is to keep the thing wet enough.
So I've temporarily put the nose back on the model to help me align the decal. And the important thing to remember with this whole thing is that the top of the nose has a slight slope to it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it actually is higher at the cab and lower in the front. So you want to align the cigar band with the bottom and with the rest of the locomotive, not with the sloping top, because otherwise it'll come out crooked.
See, and that's something that I would have missed because I wouldn't have realized that.
Yeah, so that's important to remember with EMD.
That's a good tip right there. Yeah, everybody make notes.
Yeah. So I was looking at photos and I noticed that on this particular engine, the headlight is yellow. Sometimes this little Santa Fe circle or oval actually goes over the headlight, depending on how they painted it.
Mm-hmm.
But in this one, it doesn't. So what I did was I put a brand new, very sharp blade in my knife here, and I'm going to cut the decal out of the headlight area.
Oh, wow. Oh, I see. I'm looking off camera at a reference photo, and I can see it kind of dips down there, huh, for that second lower headlight. I suppose that's something you could have tried to cut out when you were cutting the decal, but that would have been...
It's really hard to do that. So sometimes when I'm putting the decals on, as I'm getting them to lay down, they end up having little bubbles here and there. Mm-hmm. And there's one right here on the bottom of this hinge. You can see that shiny spot.
Yep. It looks like a little air bubble.
Yeah. So what I do is I take a brand new, very sharp X-Acto blade and poke it.
Could you use maybe like a pin or something
yeah,
like
if it
that?
was sharp enough, you could use a pin too. Now this is on a, you can also cut them like very gently, especially if it's like in the clear film, like this area. I don't like to cut on the colored part because it can leave voids. Anyway, once I've poked it, I just put on some more microsol.
That's the stuff that makes it set flat, right?
Right. And it just, this takes time. I've been, through the magic of TV, I've actually been working on this model for several days. And especially with these big graphics on the side, like a locomotive like Santa Fe or Rio Grande that has that big billboard style lettering, it just takes a while to get it to settle in. Yeah.
So I guess the trick then is look at it very carefully.
Right.
And as close up as you can. And I mean, the way it is already might be okay for some people.
Yeah, it could be. It depends on, I like it to be perfect.
Yep.
And I will hold the model up to the light too, because sometimes you can see if there's any silvering or any little bubbles, they'll show up at certain angles better than other angles. So I kind of really turn it over in my hands and look at it. And if I need to, I poke the decals and put some more fluid on it.
And for the viewers' information, that's how I was able to get the camera to see the bubble you were talking about. I had to turn it basically just so, so that it would show up.
Yeah, that's important because some of this stuff, it only shows up from certain angles.
Yeah.
So,
and I would say though, I understand about wanting it to be perfect, and I'm not going to argue that point, and I'm not going to argue about the point of diminishing returns or anything, because at this point, you have so much work and time and customization and everything put into this that if you were to settle for less than perfect, it would make no sense at all.
Right. Now that I'm satisfied with the decals and that they're all nice and adhered and everything looks good, the last step is to rinse the model with some water.
Okay, and what's the reason for that? To get that micro stuff off, whichever one?
Right, because those fluids that we use to soften the decals can actually leave a residue.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, and it's hard to see just looking at the model, but if you dull coat over it or put some other clear coat over it, you'll end up sometimes with these full-sized water droplets or swirls in the finish, and it looks really bad. And once you've painted over it, it's almost impossible to get rid of.
Yeah,
so
it seals it, huh?
Right. So it's better to just rinse it off with some water first. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just touch up some of the small details with some paint.
But is that just the uncoupling lever? Or?
Yeah, this unit had this little part of the uncoupling lever and this little part down here were painted yellow. I hit the grab irons on the plow with some yellow also. So besides the yellow on the uncoupling levers, I also took some red and silver and painted the MU cable. And I also used just a little red paint on the fuel filler caps on the chassis.
Yeah, that really makes it pop out.
Yeah. I've coated the model with some dull coat just out of a rattle can, Tester's dull coat. I usually put on several coats, and it does a couple of things for you. One, it hides all the decal film.
All right.
So the decals look more like they're painted on. Mm-hmm. And it also gives a nice surface for applying weathering.
Oh, right, because this has to be weathered still. You know, every time I think we're really close to being done, there's another big step.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a lot of big steps still, but we're getting down to the end.
Well,
so
that's good.
That's good. Yeah.
Everybody can breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah. So this is actually more the fun part now.
Yeah.
Because it's like putting it together.
Right.
For real, you know, instead of putting it together and taking it apart and putting it together and taking it apart. And
I have to disagree. I think the fun part will be when it's all done and you're putting it on the track for the first time.
Okay.
As long as it works.
Right. So anyway, this is probably a good place to end this chapter.
Oh.
And we can pick it up again next time.
All right. What will we be trying to work on next time?
Well, the next logical thing is probably to start putting stuff in the engine, because right now it's just a shell, so it'll need to have the cab interior, the lights, speaker enclosure.
You got to finish the fans on top there.
Fans, yeah, all of that stuff. So that'll probably be the next logical thing.
Okay, well, I guess we'll see everybody on the next episode.
Bye.